The following is a sponsored episode.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our show. Today, I'm joined by a fellow Oregonian, Alison Gardner, who is the founder and creative director of Perspektiiv Design Co. That's Perspektiiv spelled in an interesting way, which I'm actually going to ask you about, but it's Perspektiiv. And Alison is a lifelong creative entrepreneur who over the years has built and scaled multiple profitable, sustainable businesses while also navigating motherhood, which deeply informs how she approaches branding and business today. Through Perspektiiv, Alison helps visionaries and entrepreneurs create clear, aligned brands, packaging, websites, and design that support long-term growth. Her work blends strategy, design, and real-life sustainability so business owners can feel confident, grounded, and supported by their brand. Alison, so happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Ellen. Thrilled to be here.
And I just got to say, if you're watching a clip of this on YouTube or, visually, you are the first guest who has come with a mini mic, which I'm so excited to test this recording because
I'm
that's never
serious
happened.
about this.
Yeah, but it sounds great. I'm always so impressed by how a small but mighty thing can really make a difference. So anyways, Alison, I know we briefly met last fall when you came to our event, Bloom Together, which was such a whirlwind. And I'm so glad that you're a continued part of our community now. I'm really excited to chat with you about branding because this is something that I feel like is quite misunderstood in the business world. And I think a really great place to start on this conversation of building an aligned brand that actually converts without burning out is really to understand the misconceptions around branding. What would you say branding actually is, and what is it not that people think is branding?
It's a huge misconception that branding is just a logo, colors, or a pretty Instagram feed. While that's definitely a part of it, in reality, your branding is really your overall first impression and how clearly someone understands what you do, who it's for, and why it matters within seconds.
I totally agree with that. I think branding is like every minute touch point that someone has with you in their experience of your brand or your business. What would you say is one of your favorite or most overlooked opportunities to cement your branding that doesn't fall in one of those big three, like logo, colors, website?
Yeah, obviously that is so important, especially when you're considering creating those with strategy and intention and design psychology, which we'll get there at some point, I'm sure. But other than that, messaging, so how you're speaking about your business and offerings on in the digital world, in person, your client experience, so your funnels, your workflow, your communication. There's so many touch points, your digital presence, how you're showing up throughout on your website, social media, really anywhere online, and how you're showing up in person. So how you're speaking about the business and the brand. And yeah, many touch points to it beyond the visual brand.
I really resonate with that last one, especially because I think it's surprising sometimes. And I feel like you've probably experienced this too, Allison, where you go to an event maybe hosted by a brand that you really love, and then you meet someone on their team. Sometimes it's not even the founder or the CEO. Sometimes it is. But regardless, if their attitude or personality or warmth or whatever it might be differs from what the brand presents online, that single individual representative can completely change how you feel about that brand based on that in-person interaction. So I do feel like that is such an underrated place that people don't really pay a whole lot of attention to as far as how well it represents their brand. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. I do want to kind of for a second circle back to something I teased when I was introducing you, which is the spelling of the word perspective in terms of your brand. Why did you choose to spell, what's the story, I guess, behind perspective being spelled with a K and two I's versus the standard English spelling?
Yeah. So I started the business 12 years ago when I was in my early 20s. And to me, I wanted something with legacy that felt long lasting, that really described what I do in my business as a branding and design studio. And so the word perspective really landed with me because in the work that I do, we really have to put ourselves in other people's shoes and understand perspectives of different brands, different businesses, different clients, and different audiences because everyone has different goals. And so I knew that I wanted to use the word perspective because that felt really strong and foundational for me. And I also have a very special Estonian heritage and a grandmother who very much inspired me. And the spelling in Estonian is Perspektiiv. And so it was really exciting to see that your typical American could pronounce this or understand that it was perspective, but that it had that special touch to it, the personal story, the homage to my heritage. And then it was also really great for SEO and for business presence and for brand recognition because we don't typically see a word with two I's here in the States. And so using that was a nice differentiator as well.
I love that story. That's so beautiful. How amazing to be able to honor your family and your heritage, like you said, your culture in that way. So that's incredible. And also, yes, amazing on the SEO side to compete on that word versus the traditional English perspective. So that makes a whole lot of sense. For the way that you think about incorporating those special touch points in your clients' work, right? The same way that you did for your brand. What are some of your like favorite examples of ways that you've been able to add in those nuanced elements to a brand where maybe it's not like immediately obvious, but it really just makes their brand storytelling or brand identity so much stronger and richer?
Mm, it does really start with the brand name. We want to be intentional. We want to craft a story in the most simple way possible. We want to consider how it looks in your visual brand. So having it be short, there's so many different goals that clients can have, but really starting with that brand name. And that can be the most challenging place for people to start, I've seen,
Yeah.
especially when so many are taken. I think that's typically our biggest challenge when we're creating brand names for clients is we
Mm.
come up with so many different names and we also do research to make sure that it's available in their sector and that they're legally solid. It can be hard to find one that is available. And so really starting with that brand name and thinking about how you can be different, really looking at your audience and your market and your competitors especially and seeing how they're showing up before you dive into brand name, doing that research, connecting with yourself. We'll, I'm sure, get into strategy here momentarily, but really thinking about your USP, so your unique selling proposition, and how you're special, how your perspective is different. I'm trying to integrate the personal story or those elements in your brand or your business that just feel really different, or maybe they're a little bit awkward. It doesn't have to be based on like your goals and your market and such specifics. You can really get playful with it in an aligned way. Obviously, different brand names have different goals, but just being okay with not following the traditional path.
Yeah, I think of it almost as like, how can you make yourself memorable first? And then if people can remember you, then they have the opportunity to learn more about you, explore your services and products, and like really deeper dive into all the things that you can do for them or like help them. But if they can't even remember you, then all of that, no matter how good it is like kind of a moot point, you know?
Right.
And for you, like when you're thinking through recent client projects or work that you've done, do you have like a specific example of a client you loved working with where they were able to bring in that more unique element or just something that stood out to you? Were like, oh, this would be, a great example of what you just shared.
Yeah. One that comes to mind is a landscape design studio that we are working with in Bend, Oregon.
Cool.
And if you look around Bend, Oregon, you see a lot of the same, especially in the landscape and construction. They're all using the same names, the Cascades, etc. There's a lot of like hot names that are being used, especially for localized businesses.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to do something different. And so we really got into understanding the story and why they create what they create. And even though it was challenging for this owner of this landscape design business to really take it down to the essential, he was like, oh, well, I make my clients' yards look nice. And we really got down to it. And it was the heart of creating outdoor spaces that felt like home, that felt like a second living room, that felt like somewhere you want to be. And so we started with the brand name, playing with the idea of what is that? It's like that second space. And so we went through the brand identity name process and came up with second nature. And so there's a nod to the second place of your home, which is outside, and nature, which is really what they're bringing in. And so that established the brand name, and now we're on to the visual brand identity.
I love that. I mean, I'm a sucker for any sort of like play on words, but that just feels so homey. Like I literally felt an emotion in my body as I heard you say that name. And I feel like that's what great branding does. It like evokes an emotion or personal
Yeah.
connection, right, to the brand. I know we'll talk about the kind of the design psychology that you infuse in your work in just a moment, but I would love to first kind of explore this idea of trends, because I think that this is another like trap that a lot of business owners fall into, right? Similar to home design. Like, okay, I was watching a reel that came across my feed the other day and I felt very called out by the interior designer. I mean, rightfully so, but they were like, you know, what's like the new like millennial gray that's going to be super outdated? They were like, don't hate me for this, but it's white oak floors. And I was like, oh, dang, because I love my white oak floors. I mean, they're not actually oak, they're like LVP or whatever, but you know, the look of that. And I was
Mhm.
like, oh, dang. I was like, I mean, I know it's trending and it's a trendy thing, but I was like, I genuinely think 20 years from now, I will still love that look. But it is hard sometimes to discern between like, do I just like this because I see it everywhere? Or do I like this because it is like a meaningful thing to my brand. So, what's your
Right.
perspective on that, right? Like when people are trying to build a brand that feels authentic to who they are and has that longevity, how do you help your clients navigate between like, okay, this is truly you versus like, I think this is just like a trendy thing that you're trying to fit yourself into a box?
Right. And there's so much online to compare to and get
Yeah,
inspired by. And sometimes I hate to say it, but it's less about you and more about your business and your ideal clients.
fair.
And so typically I joke that, okay, we all love this like sage green. It
Yeah.
looks great in our kitchens. It's really nurturing feeling. But is that going to attract your ideal clients? Is that going to help you build a sustainable brand? And so that's why I always suggest starting with strategy and really considering a few different elements, including design psychology, to help you make those informed design decisions. So we're not just creating a visual brand that is exciting to us.
That makes complete sense. I feel that that has been one of the most difficult things of building our brand, building Cubicle to CEO, is my DNA is so much in this brand, but at the same time, I want it to be a brand that can stand apart on its own and isn't just like me or, you know, Ellen Yin show or whatever. So it has been interesting to like unlearn, okay, my brand doesn't just have to be a reflection of my personal favorite colors. Like the colors need to be something that communicate, you know, a subconscious message to people that ties back to the brand. So let's talk about that psychology portion a little bit more, because this is like the brain stuff I could nerd about all day. Tell us like some of your favorite psychology aspects maybe of branding that you really consider when you're working with clients.
Yeah, sounds great. And just to reflect a mirror, I think that your brand is a beautiful representation of you, and
Thank
your
you.
clients resonate with that because clients are, it seems like a past version of yourself that you're serving. And
Yeah.
so there is room, especially within a personal brand, if you're the face of the brand, you do want to be excited about your brand and feel in alignment with it. So that's definitely still something to consider. I wouldn't say, hey, if you like it, let's toss it out the door, especially if your clients are similar to who you are and if you're really integrated in it like you are.
Yeah. Thank you. That's very affirming.
Yeah. So, as far as design psychology goes, this is definitely my favorite conversation to have within brand identity design. My mom is a therapist, and I'm obsessed with the brain and how it works as well. So, I get to nerd out here a bit. So, with design psychology, really as humans, every element in design has some sort of subliminal messaging. So, color, typography, illustration style, etc., all has a message. And so when we're considering design psychology for our brands, we really want to be tapping into what we want our ideal audience to feel when they have an experience with their brand. And so I usually recommend that our clients go into a bit of a meditation and really think and feel about how they want their clients to feel when they are going through whatever transformational experience they are providing. So if they are a nutritionist, they want to really imagine, okay, when someone comes in, I probably want them to feel taken care of and seen and trusting and at peace. And then when they're done working with me or when they're seeing that transformation, I want them to feel empowered. I want them to feel light, whatever those keywords are, and using those keywords in the design process to inform what design decisions we make as far as all of those design elements that I mentioned really help us create a brand that then ultimately creates that experience before the client has even experienced your service or your product. And so really thinking about those feelings is key at first, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying here. It's like starting with that bigger picture vision of that feeling again, or emotion, like we said, that you want to evoke, and then working backwards to almost use that as a filter. Like, does that match up? Yes or no? And that's kind of like a easier decision tree almost from there. I feel like our listeners learn best when they're able to understand tangible examples. So can you think back to either your own brand or a recent client project that you've worked on where, let's say, there was like a specific word and you can share that word of what they wanted their end clients, let's say, to feel or experience about their brand. And then let's say during the design process, maybe they had wanted like a certain color or a certain typography choice or a certain, I don't know, any design element, take your pick. And then you were actually able to come in and say, actually, we're going to readjust, and you like counteracted, I guess, like their original idea because it didn't match what they said they actually wanted, like an example of that psychology in play.
Yeah. How fun. This is always so much better with a visual example. So if y'all want to follow along, there is a blog on my website. The brand identity that I'll talk about is called Rage Wellness. And this is a really special brand. I'm really glad that you asked that question so I could speak about this and even just highlight this business. So Rage Wellness is based in San Francisco. And the story is about a woman who was in the corporate tech startup grind with a bunch of white men. And it was a toxic environment. It was not appropriate. And she was mad, as a lot of women in society today are. And that anger she turned into fuel by starting this concept of a business. So when we worked together a year ago, she was just getting off the ground. She was leaving her job and taking the leap of faith to start this business. So Rage Wellness is a mobile rage room for women. And
So
so
cool.
she imagined the current rage room experience is very masculine. You go in and there's metal music playing and there's mirrors to smash, and it's kind of a man's world. And she wanted a safe experience because we're all holding this collective anger right now, everyone in their own unique ways. And so, through her experience, she wanted to create a space for women, especially, to come and feel safe to get their anger out and feel like it's wellness. We were never taught to express, or a lot of us weren't taught to express our anger. And so she wanted to create a place where women could safely go and do that. And so within this process, we thought about the experience of these women going into these rage rooms. And specifically, so we'll talk about color first. So when we were thinking about color, we were thinking about the femininity of being a woman, of creating a safe space. And then we were also thinking about the empowering feeling, and first the anger, and then the empowering and clear feeling that comes after moving through that anger in a really healthy way. Along with the Rage Room, she's also planning to partner with therapists who can support you both before and after a rage session. So it was very intentional. And so we wanted her brand to really speak intentionality. We wanted it to speak a safe place. We wanted it to be really feminine and empowering and to have a bit of rage to it. So in the brand, we decided with a pink and a red. So the pink being femininity, and then we really leaned into that red. So it was mostly a red brand with bits of pink in it to have that femininity to it. And then for the typography, we used a mix of a really heavyweight sans serif for rage. And then for wellness, we used a really lovely, like old time script font. And so the contrast of rage and wellness, we really wanted to show that clearly in the visual brand. The brand name had it, the visual brand had it, and the experience had it. And so all of that came together. We also expanded the brand with some posters that she put around downtown, and all of these had vintage graphics of women like burning cakes from the oven, and just like that ultimate femininity, but then the rage. And so within the brand, we created that contrast everywhere. It's, a really great example of design psychology in action.
Wow. I am so impressed and also like so touched by her mission and what she's trying to achieve. But just the way you explained it is so beautiful. Like so much thought goes into a great brand. And what I love about what you shared is really being able to capture the duality of the human experience, especially when two ideas seem at odds with one another. Like wellness, typically people think of like peaceful, calm, like soothing green color, blue and green colors, like you said, but this is like such a cool pattern interrupt. Like what a way to stand out in the market, not only with the word rage, which immediately like evokes like a visceral reaction in people, whether good or bad, but it's memorable. And then also, like you said, making red the dominant color when that's not expected in the wellness space. And so like, I'm obsessed. I can't wait to go look up her brand. And I hope that she brings her mobile experience to Oregon, because I've yet to go to a rage room, but every time I see it, I'm like, oh, that looks like such a fun like outlet to like really get your energy out. So I would love for my first experience to be through a brand like hers.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So cool. What an amazing project. I would love to also, explore this idea of business owners who may be listening to this and they're like, you know what, I have a brand, so I'm not starting from scratch. Like maybe they're even a really established, successful business, but they feel like they're still kind of invisible a little bit from a branding perspective, at least. Like maybe they've relied on, a lot of word of mouth or referrals to grow over the years, and they don't feel like they have the visibility that they want for their brand. Or on the opposite end of the spectrum, maybe it's a brand that is struggling, that isn't converting. What are some of those first shifts that you would recommend to someone in either situation before going for a full rebrand?
So my first recommendation before you just dive into visual brand identity design is to really take an audit of everywhere your business and your brand is showing up. So this could be your website, your social media pages. This could even be like a Calendly link where people schedule calls with you, really everywhere where you're showing up. And for some business owners, this is going to be a lot to audit. This will be more minimal, but really making sure when you are searching that not only are you showing up online, are your platforms consistent? Is one platform looking like the other? We want to make sure that people recognize us. So if they see us from our business card at a market and then they go to our website, we're wanting to make sure that your visual brand and your messaging is looking consistent. Otherwise, they're going to break trust immediately and go in another direction. And so really taking an audit of everything, making sure it's looking consistent is important, and making sure that you're showing up online too. I definitely also recommend an SEO audit if you have not done that. So doing the research as to what your clients are looking online and how they're looking online, what words they're using to find you, and then really making sure that's integrated in your brand messaging and behind the scenes on your website and in your Instagram caption. So you'll hear me a lot speak about consistency, and it really is that. Posting with consistency, showing up online with consistency, and like you mentioned too, Ellen, showing up in person with consistency. So if I'm the face of my brand and I want my audience to really get the first impression that I am thoughtful, intentional, creative, driven, whatever that might be, I need to be that person and express that part of myself in person as well.
Speaking of all the different ways that a brand can show up, one thing that I think makes your studio very unique as a design studio is you help businesses show up not only in their digital presence, which, is kind of the most common way a lot of us experience a brand these days, but also in their physical representation, and not just personality or in-person conversations like we were just referencing, but like the physical packaging a product might include. And that goes for even like as a service-based brand, just for anyone listening, I think we can all still agree we still have physical representations of our brand in the world, even if it's not a physical product per se, but like even the business cards, like you mentioned, or a flyer or whatever it might be. But for the actual product-based companies that you work with, where you get to design their actual packaging, Alison, I would love to hear more about how you feel the approach maybe, or how you think about design for physical products or materials maybe differs from when you're designing purely for a digital presence.
So we always think about with CPG packaging or any sort of packaging for product, we think about the experience. So similar to how we think about the brand, also understanding that the brand always comes first. So before we design packaging or concept packaging, we always work on brand name, brand messaging, visual brand, supporting illustrations, any of those elements that we'll be using on packaging. So it really is rooted in strategy and a thoughtful process before we even get there. But then when we get to packaging design, that's where we get to create an in-person experience. And so a good example of this that's not my work is like an Apple box, for example, the Apple packaging. Everyone wants to keep afterwards. I know I've got like 3 of them in my closet, and they're just like, they feel really nice when you're opening it. It's got a matte texture. It feels quality. It feels like you could reuse it. There's intention to that. And so beyond that, thinking about your own product and how you're packaging it, we want to create that experience, but from its own unique positioning for whatever your brand is. So for an example from the studio, we worked this year with a really cool company that is starting a dressing line, and their dressing is in packets, and you just mix water and lemon and mayo. And so we wanted this like quick grab and go experience, but something that felt very high end and intentional. And so we looked at texture. We looked at the type of packaging. We looked at possible windows. We looked at how the packets would rip when you open them. We looked at messaging and language on the box itself. So there's so many different elements for packaging design that will communicate. So beyond your brand, the experience and the attributes and what the audience is going to get out of purchasing your product comparatively to someone else's on the shelf.
Wow. I just love that intentionality is something that has shown up again and again and again in our conversation. I can really see it in the level of detail that you take with your client work. And so I just want to, commend you for that, because I feel like that really is what makes the subtle but biggest differences in how somebody thinks of your brand. And the Apple example is so great, because I remember reading an article a while back, but it was recent, like in the last year, and it was someone explaining exactly that. And I can't remember exactly what they said, but it was something along the lines of, it was either like the box has like a weighted feel, like when you open it, or it was something about like a soft close, like when you like push the box together, it kind of like gently contracts or whatever. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting, because, it's something that I've experienced 1,000 times, because I've been like an Apple diehard user since I was in high school, but I never like, stopped and like looked at the box and was like, oh, well, I noticed that they did XYZ. But again, it's like these subtle influences that create that premium experience that you notice subconsciously, but you don't really stop and like consciously processed why you feel the way you feel about it. So I think
Branding.
yep, that's branding. Exactly. So that was such a great way to illustrate that, I feel like, in a real life experience. Allison, to wrap up our conversation today, I would love to take a moment to talk about sustainability because I know this is something that is very near and dear to the work that you do as a designer, making sure that you help founders build sustainable brands that will last a long time without burning themselves out. And that overwhelm and burnout is something a lot of us struggle with when it comes to our business as a whole, but especially with branding. And so tell us your unique perspective on that and what we can be doing differently.
Absolutely. So I come from a culture, and many of us, I mean, all of us really do, especially as entrepreneurs, that you have to work hard and you have to show up every day and you have to do a lot to make it work. And the goal with this intentional branding is that you don't have to do as much as you would have without it, because you have this intentional foundation that is showing up for you, that's communicating for you, that is really serving you and connecting with your audience. And so really making sure that you're intentional from the very beginning will help you build a sustainable career. For me, I burned myself out after scaling initially and realized that I could not sustain that, especially if I wanted to grow a family. And so, really considering how at the beginning, when I was creating my brand, I also was thinking about the structure and my boundaries and how I wanted my audience to communicate with me online, how I wanted them to contact me. Did I want them to call me on a Sunday, or did I want to have a really streamlined system that would help protect my boundary and my energy and also create a profitable and sustainable business? So I definitely recommend to anyone in that beginning phase, or even anyone that has scaled and is looking around and doesn't have much time left in the day, to take an audit of everything, including your brand. And like we had mentioned, your brand is also the customer experience. And so looking through that customer experience, what's necessary? What's not necessary? Is it communicated clear enough, or are they emailing you with 10 questions? So really making sure that you're looking at all of these touch points, and at the beginning when you're doing brand design, can help lead to a more sustainable business in the future.
That's so helpful to think about branding through that lens of like preventative support, right? Like, how can I make my messaging? Because you said messaging is such a key component of branding. Like, how can I make it clear so that I'm attracting the right people, but also that they are clear on what to do once they work with me? Like, I think I mean, I've rarely heard a brand designer ever mention that before. So I think, again, that brings just like another layer of intentionality for clients who choose to work with you. So thank you. That was very helpful. You mentioned that you scaled to a point where you were really successful, but then it wasn't working for you. It wasn't sustainable for you, even though on paper it was successful. You had to make some shifts and pivots within your own business. What brought about that change for you?
Yeah, well, there's been a few times in life that I've had to reassess what the business looks like, because I started it 12 years ago. So there's been so much growth in the business and with myself that there's maybe been 3 points in life where I've looked at what's going on in my life and then in my business, and really had to make some big shifts to make sure it was sustainable for me and for my team. The most recent time was when my son was born 4 years ago. And he is a special child with some special needs. And so I needed more of my time to dedicate towards him and his nervous system and our family. And so at that time, really for me, it was team structuring and looking at my system and having all of what I do written down to make sure that my team could follow it really clearly, because I'm a very intentional person and it was important for me that my team do the same. So I really invested my time in creating systems that could be run by anyone else, and then taking myself out of the equation and seeing, okay, what do I do best? What is my superpower? And how can I show up and water my business and my team and my clients without being burnt out? So I delegated and I really trusted the people that were in front of me. I have a team of 6 now and one full-time employee who is incredible. Her name is Emma. You'll probably work with her as a brand designer if you work with us, but really leaning into other people. And it made me a better leader because I then was able to step out of the everyday and focus on what I did best, where my joy was, which ultimately creates energy for me to then give back to my community and my team and my designs. And so really being intentional about where my time was going was important. And then figuring out who could take on what roles based on what their superpower was and divvying the work up.
So good. Such a great reminder that sometimes it takes pausing for a second or slowing for a second to build the infrastructure, to build those systems and processes that feel like they're pulling you away from the work that you need to be doing. But in reality, it kind of goes back to one of my favorite books is The One Thing. And I think in that book, there's like this quote, like, okay, if you look at your to-do list and you ask yourself, what is the one thing I could do today, that by doing that, everything else on my list either becomes easier or unnecessary. And what your answer kind of reminded me of that, of like, okay, what could I be doing in the back end that, yes, is going to take a bit of investment up front, but by doing it this one time, all other times that we run into this situation are now going to be much more streamlined and sustainable. I think, yeah, that was such a great reminder for all of us. I am just so grateful for all the amazing insight and tips you've offered today, Alison. What are some of the ways that our listeners can work with you? Because you do offer a variety of services for both online service-based businesses as well as physical product or e-com brands. So tell us all the ways that someone could explore working with Perspektiiv.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, we are a branding and design studio. So we help our clients with the brand foundation and then we help them scale it. And so really being intentional about the foundation and then rolling it out to packaging, websites, email newsletters, print suites, etc. Merchandise. Merchandise is really fun.
Yes, so
Hats,
fun.
tote bags, sweaters, etc., etc. The list goes on. So we're really here for that consistency for the brand, making an impact in the world in your unique way that maybe it's not easy for everyone to do in an artistic way. And so
Mhm.
we're really here to bridge that gap of your vision and making it into a work of art for your brand. That's what we do best. And then we do have a brand prep workbook on our website that I definitely recommend taking a look at if anyone is considering a rebrand or a new brand for a future business. This tool will really help you create informed design decisions for your brand, no matter who you're working with. So making sure that strategy is in place before you design is very important.
Absolutely. By the way, all of the ways that you can connect with Alison herself and then Perspektiiv Design Studio will be below in the show notes, but there is an amazing resource that you had contributed to Freebie Fest, which if you guys haven't heard, it's like a roundup of 28 incredible resources, many of them normally paid. I believe Alison, yours is normally a paid resource, but being offered to you guys for free. Do you want to speak just for a moment to what you contributed to that so people can go find that resource and utilize it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a bit of a bundle package. So the brand prep workbook is included. So it has everything that you should consider before you start visualizing your brand. So it talks about your mission, the future and goals, your target audience, your unique selling proposition, the price point, the design psychology. It really dives deep to help you get that strategy set before considering what the colors should be. It also includes $250 off our essential brand kit, which is our core offering of brand identity design. And it's great for the new business owner or someone that needs a rebrand done with intention, and includes a logo suite, a color palette, a typography set, and an organized final brand package. And prior to that, we have plenty of time where we're co-creating together, really understanding your strategy, putting together a mood board. So a lot of collaboration with our design team as well.
Amazing. Make sure at the very least today you go download that brand prep workbook so that you can prepare yourself to really up level your visual identity. And then that generous $250 discount, Alison, thank you so much for offering that to our community. We'll make sure the link to download that within our freebie fest is also included in the show notes. So everything you need, go down below in the show notes. And I also just wanted a real quick shout out, Alison, that I saw your work come to life with my friend Portia, who is my esthetician, and she owns Be Well Aesthetic Studio. And oh my gosh, it was so much fun. We had coffee right before the new year, and I remember she was so excited. I got to see her brand before she put it out there, and your studio did such a great job with her rebrand. So I can personally speak to the quality of your work, Alison. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, it was a joy to work with her and bring her vision to life so she can support her community with what she does best.
It's
and
so
support
beautiful.
herself.
Yes, exactly. It's branding makes all the difference, you guys. It really does. So, Alison, thank you so much for your wisdom today. And thank you all for tuning in. We will catch you in the next episode.